Hello everyone, and welcome back. Tonight's story is 7 Sinister Rules for My Lifeguard Shift at the Forbidden Lake. Stay out of the water. Creepypasta. Being a lifeguard usually means saving people from drowning. But not here. At this lake, the rules are terrifying. The waters are dangerous. And breaking even one of those rules means you might never come back out alive. From strange figures lurking beneath the surface to whispers that call you closer, this is no ordinary lifeguard job. If you enjoy these disturbing creepypastas, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? I always love seeing where everyone is tuning in. Now, let's begin. They never found Mark's body. All that was left was his whistle, sitting on the edge of the dock, gleaming in the moonlight. He broke the rules. I didn't. That's the only reason I'm here to tell you this story, and the only reason I still wake up screaming, smelling the sweet, rotten scent of the lake water. It all started with me being broke. College-level broke. The kind of broke where you're deciding between instant noodles and a new pack of socks. My student loans were a mountain, and my summer job at the campus bookstore had fallen through. I was desperate. I spent days scrolling through job sites, finding nothing but unpaid internships and minimum wage fast food gigs. My hope was drying up faster than a puddle on hot asphalt. That's when I saw the ad. It wasn't online. It was in an old local paper my landlord used to wrap fish in. The ad was small, tucked away in the classifieds. It was printed in a strange, old-fashioned font. It read, "Lifeguard needed for private lake. Season runs June to August. Excellent pay. Accommodation provided. Call Silas Blackwood. Excellent pay." Those were the magic words. The number was a local one, so I called it, my heart pounding a little with a mix of hope and nervousness. A man answered on the first ring. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Blackwood," he grunted. Hi," I stammered. "I'm calling about the lifeguard job?" There was a long pause on the other end. I thought he might have hung up. Then the raspy voice came back. "You certified?" "Yes, sir. Fully. CPR, first aid, the works." Another pause. "You a strong swimmer?" It was a weird question. Of course I was. "One of the best on my swim team," I said, trying to sound confident. "That won't matter," he rasped. "Can you follow rules?" "Exactly as they are written, without question." "Yes, sir. Absolutely. I needed this job. I would have agreed to wear a chicken suit if he'd asked." "Be at the turnoff on Old Mill Road tomorrow at noon. There's a gate. It'll be open. Come alone." Then he hung up. No goodbye. No "see you then." Just a click in the dial tone. It was strange, but the thought of excellent pay was a powerful drug. It made me ignore the first little prickle of fear on the back of my neck. That was the first sign I see now, the first of many. The next day, I drove out to Old Mill Road. The pavement turned to gravel about 5 miles in. My little car rattled and groaned, kicking up a cloud of dust behind me. The trees grew closer together here, their branches tangling overhead, blocking out most of the sun. It felt like I was driving down a long, dark tunnel. Just like the ad said, there was a gate. It was tall and made of wrought iron, with twisted black bars that looked like angry vines. A simple sign was attached to it with rusty wire. It said, "Blackwood." The gate was slightly ajar, just enough for my car to slip through. As soon as I was on the other side, I heard a loud clang behind me. I looked in my rearview mirror. The gate had swung shut. a heavy, final sound. I told myself it was just the wind. The gravel road continued for another mile, ending in a small clearing. In front of me was a modest, dark wood cabin with a plume of smoke rising from its stone chimney, and beyond it was the lake. My first thought was that it was beautiful. The water was a deep, impossible blue, smooth as polished glass. A perfect circle of white sand formed a small beach. A single wooden dock jutted out into the water, and on the shore sat a tall, white Lifeguard tower. It looked like a postcard from a summer camp that time forgot. An old man was sitting on the porch of the cabin, rocking slowly in a wooden chair. He was thin and wiry, with skin like wrinkled leather and eyes that seemed too pale in his tanned face. He watched me get out of my car without saying a word. "Mr. Blackwood?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the vast silence of the woods. He just nodded, his pale eyes never leaving mine. "You're the boy from the phone." "Yes, sir. I'm Alex." He stood up, his joints making a slight creaking sound. "Silas, come on, let me show you the place." He walked me down to the beach. Up close, the perfection started to fray at the edges. The white sand was a little too clean, almost unnatural. There were no washed-up leaves, no tangled weeds, no signs of birds or any life at all along the shore. And the water, that deep blue, seemed darker now. It didn't reflect the sky properly. It looked like it was swallowing the light. "This is it," Silas said, sweeping a bony hand towards the lake. "Your post." He pointed at the Lifeguard tower. "You're up there from 10 in the morning to 6 in the evening. Not a minute before, not a minute after. Sharp. You understand? 10 to 6. Got it," I said. "So, who uses the lake? Is it a family, or—" Silas turned his head slowly to look at me. His expression was blank. "Nobody. Nobody uses the lake." I stared at him, confused. "Nobody? Then, why do you need a lifeguard?" "The owners require one. It's an insurance thing," he said flatly. The explanation felt thin, rehearsed. "You get paid to sit in that chair and watch an empty lake. Easiest money you'll ever make, if you follow the rules." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, laminated card. It was yellowed at the edges, the text typed out on what looked like an old typewriter. He pushed it into my hand. His fingers were cold as stone. "Your duties," he said. "Learn them. Live by them." I looked down at the card. There were 7 rules listed, typed out in that same old-fashioned font. The first one read, "Rule 1. Be on the tower from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Not a minute early, not a minute late. The quiet hours are not for you." Okay, simple enough. But then I read the second one. Rule 2. Never, under any circumstances, enter the water. Your job is to watch, not to swim. I blinked and read Rule 2 again. Never enter the water? What if someone, I don't know, falls in? I'm a lifeguard. My job is to save people. Silas gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Like I said, boy, nobody comes here, nobody to save." He leaned in a little closer, and I could smell the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something vaguely metallic, like old pennies. The water, it's got a unique bacteria, very dangerous. The currents are treacherous too. You'll get pulled down before you can take 2 strokes. You stay out of the water. That's the most important rule of all. His pale eyes bored into mine, and I knew he wasn't just talking about bacteria. There was a warning there, deep and ancient, a threat. I should have walked away right then. I should have dropped the card in the too perfect sand, gotten in my rattling car, and driven until the creepy woods and the dark, silent lake were just a bad dream. Any sane person would have. But I saw the dollar signs. I saw a summer without worrying about rent. I saw a solution to all my problems printed on a yellowing card. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I understand. I'll follow the rules." Silas nodded slowly, a thin smile touching his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "Good boy," he rasped. "You start tomorrow. Your friend gets here in the morning. He'll need to learn the rules too." "My friend?" I asked, confused. I thought I was coming alone. "The ad was for 2 guards, Silas stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Always 2. The lake requires it." He turned and walked back toward his cabin, leaving me standing alone at the edge of the dark, silent water. That's how I met Mark. He showed up the next morning, just as clueless and just as desperate for the money as I was. And that's how it all started. The mistake that would end up costing him everything. Mark rolled up the next morning in a beat-up pickup truck that sounded like a blender full of rocks. He was the opposite of me in almost every way. While I was quiet and tended to overthink things, Mark was loud, confident, and had a grin that seemed permanently attached to his face. He was built like a swimmer, all broad shoulders and lean muscle, and he carried himself with an easygoing swagger. "You must be Alex," he said, hopping out of his truck and sticking out a hand. "I'm Mark. Can you believe this gig? Getting paid to get a tan. We hit the jackpot, man." Silas emerged from his cabin like a ghost, holding a second laminated card. He didn't bother with introductions. He just handed the card to Mark and repeated the same speech he'd given me, his voice a low, gravelly monotone. I watched Mark's face as he read the rules. He skimmed them, his eyebrows shooting up. When he got to rule number 2, never enter the water, he let out a short, sharp laugh. "You're kidding, right?" he said to Silas. "No swimming? I'm a lifeguard. It's like telling a chef not to cook." Silas didn't crack a smile. "You want the job? You follow the rules. All of them." His gaze was as cold and hard as river stones. "The water is not safe." Mark just shrugged, that easy grin sliding back onto his face. "Sure thing, boss. Whatever you say, your lake, your rules." But he winked at me when Silas turned his back. I didn't wink back. That cold feeling was coiling in my gut again. Mark thought it was a joke. I was starting to believe it wasn't. Silas showed us to our accommodation. It was a small, one-room cabin set back in the trees, a few hundred yards from the lake. It was rustic but clean. 2 simple beds, a small table, a bathroom, and a tiny kitchenette. It was basic, but it was more than I expected. Still, there were odd details. The single window was sealed shut with old, discolored caulk, and carved into the wooden headboard of my bed was a strange symbol, like a spiral with a dot in the center. I traced it with my finger. The wood was worn smooth, as if many other fingers had traced it before mine. At exactly 10 o'clock, we climbed the ladder to the Lifeguard tower. It was surprisingly comfortable, with a wide seat and a canvas awning to block the sun. From up there, we could see the entire lake, a perfect, still circle of dark blue. The silence was the first thing that really got to me. It was absolute. No birds singing, no frogs croaking, no insects buzzing, just the whisper of the wind through the pines and the sound of our own breathing. The first few hours were exactly as Silas had promised, incredibly, mind-numbingly boring. We watched the empty water. We watched the empty beach. We watched the silent trees on the far shore. Mark tried to make conversation, telling me about his plans to travel after the summer, about a girl he was trying to impress. I tried to listen, but my eyes kept getting drawn back to the lake. It was just so still, unnaturally still. "Let's see the rest of these crazy rules," Mark said, pulling his laminated card out of his pocket. He read them out loud. "Rule 3. Do not answer if you hear your name called from the woods." He chuckled. "Spooky. Guess we gotta watch out for forest ghosts." Rule 4. If you see ripples on the surface when there is no wind, look away immediately. Focus on the tree line until they are gone. He squinted at the water. "What kind of ripples? Fish, maybe?" "There are no fish in the lake," I heard myself say. I don't know how I knew it, I just did. The thought appeared in my head, fully formed and certain. The lake was sterile, lifeless. Mark just shrugged. "Whatever." Rule 5. At dusk, you may find small carved stones on the dock. Do not touch them. Leave them where they lie. Rule 6. Never leave personal belongings on the beach overnight. The lake likes souvenirs. He laughed again, a loud, booming sound in the oppressive quiet. "See? This old guy has a sense of humor." "And Rule 7, he finished. If your partner begins to act strangely, speaks in a voice that is not their own, or hums a tune you do not recognize, lock yourself in the bathroom of your cabin and do not come out until sunrise. Do not listen to their apologies or their pleas." He folded the card and tucked it away. "Okay, this is officially the weirdest job I've ever had. But for this kind of money, I'll play along." I didn't think it was funny. Every rule felt like a key, unlocking a door to a room I didn't want to enter. Rule 7 especially. I glanced over at Mark. He was just a normal college kid trying to make some summer cash. The idea of him humming a strange tune was ridiculous. But still, around 3 in the afternoon, the first strange thing happened. It was subtle. So subtle that Mark didn't even notice at first. I was scanning the shore, my eyes tracing the perfect line where the white sand met the dark woods, when I saw it, sitting right at the water's edge, halfway between the tower and the dock. It was a little red ball, a simple rubber playground ball, the kind a kid would use. I stared at it. It hadn't been there a minute ago. I was sure of it. I would have noticed. My entire job was to notice things. "Hey, Mark," I said, my voice quiet. "Do you see that?" He followed my gaze. "Huh, a ball. Where'd that come from?" "I don't know. It just appeared." "Must have washed up," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Washed up from where?" I pressed. "There are no streams or rivers feeding this lake. We're in the middle of nowhere, and there's no one here." Mark squinted at it. "Maybe Silas has a dog or something." But his voice lacked conviction. We both knew Silas didn't have a dog. We hadn't seen any sign of another living soul. We watched the ball for the rest of our shift. It didn't move. It just sat there, a bright red blemish on the otherwise perfect scene. It was a tiny, insignificant thing, a lost toy. But it felt wrong. It was an open loop, a question without an answer. The silence of the lake seemed to deepen around it, as if the water itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what we would do. Little did I know, that little red ball was a test. It was the first move in a game we didn't even know we were playing. And we were already losing. At exactly 6 o'clock, we climbed down from the tower. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long, distorted shadows across the beach. The air grew cooler, and a thin mist was starting to rise from the surface of the lake, like steam from a witch's cauldron. The red ball was still there, sitting at the water's edge. "I'm gonna go grab it," Mark said, starting to walk towards it. "Wait," I said, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Maybe we should just leave it." Rule 6 flashed in my mind. Never leave personal belongings on the beach overnight. This wasn't ours, but the principal felt the same. Don't interfere. "Dude, it's just a ball," Mark scoffed. "Probably belongs to the owner's kids or something. We'll just put it on the dock. No big deal." He walked over to it and bent down. I stayed back, a good 10 feet from the waterline. I watched as his fingers closed around the smooth rubber. The moment he touched it, a faint smell hit the air. It was sweet, but with a rotten undertone, like flowers wilting in a vase of stagnant water. Mark didn't seem to notice. He tossed the ball in the air and caught it. "See? Just a ball." He started walking towards the dock, but I saw him hesitate for a second. He stopped and looked down at his hand, the one that had picked up the ball. He flexed his fingers, a strange expression on his face. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head as if to clear it. For a second there, my hand felt really cold and kind of numb. He shrugged it off. Must have been leaning on it funny. He walked to the end of the dock and placed the red ball gently on the weathered planks, then jogged back to me. "Let's get some food. I'm starving." As we walked back to our cabin, I glanced over my shoulder. The sun had almost completely disappeared. In the deepening twilight, the lake looked like a pool of black ink. The red ball on the dock was a single drop of blood against the darkness. I should have listened to my instincts. I should have told Mark to throw the ball into the woods, to get it as far away from the water as possible. That was the second sign, and I ignored it completely. The first week passed in a blur of surreal boredom. Every day was the same. We woke up, walked to the tower at 10, sat in silence, watching nothing, and left at 6. The lake remained perfectly still. The woods remained perfectly quiet. Nothing happened. The only company we had was Silas, who would leave a cooler with sandwiches and bottles of water at the base of the tower for us each morning without a word. The red ball was always gone by the time we got to the tower in the morning, and every afternoon around 3 o'clock it would reappear, sitting in the exact same spot at the water's edge. Mark made it a little ritual to go and collect it at the end of our shift and place it on the dock. He said it was the most exciting part of his day. I hated it. Every time he touched it, I got that same cold feeling in my gut. It was on the 5th day that we encountered Rule 4. The sky was overcast, a flat, gray ceiling that made the lake look even darker and more menacing. There was no wind. The air was heavy and still. Mark was half asleep in his chair, his head lolling to one side. I was trying to read a book, but the words kept blurring together. That's when I saw them. Ripples. They started in the exact center of the lake. A tiny circular pattern, as if someone had dropped a single pebble into the water. But there was nothing there. The ripples spread outwards, silent and perfect. They were slow, deliberate, and as they moved across the surface, the water inside the circle seemed different. It was darker, somehow thicker than the water around it. Rule 4. If you see ripples on the surface when there is no wind, look away immediately. Focus on the tree line until they're gone. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mark," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Mark, wake up." He jolted awake. "What? What's going on?" "The ripples," I said, forcing myself to tear my eyes away from the lake and stare at the dense, dark green of the pines on the far shore, just like the rule said. "Don't look at the water. Look at the trees." "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice thick with sleep. And then he said, "Whoa." I knew he was looking. I could feel his gaze fixed on the lake. I squeezed my eyes shut, but I could still see the image of those perfect, unnatural circles expanding in the darkness of my mind. "Alex, you have to see this," he breathed. It's like the water is breathing." "Mark, don't," I hissed, my voice tight with panic. "The rule." "Look away. Relax, man. It's just a weird current or something. It's actually kind of cool." I could hear the fascination in his voice, and it terrified me. I kept my eyes locked on a single tall pine tree across the lake, focusing on the texture of its bark, the shape of its branches, anything to keep from looking down. The silence stretched on, broken only by Mark's soft, awestruck breathing. It felt like an eternity. After a few minutes, he said, "Okay, they're gone. You can look now." I opened my eyes slowly, hesitantly. The lake was once again a sheet of black glass. It was as if the ripples had never been there at all. But something had changed. The air felt colder. The silence felt heavier. I looked at Mark. His face was pale, and there was a strange, distant look in his eyes. He was staring out at the center of the lake, where the ripples had started. "What did you see?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He blinked, as if coming out of a trance. He gave a little shake of his head. "Nothing. It was just weird. The water looked deep, deeper than it should be." He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow and frail. Probably just my eyes playing tricks on me. Let's just forget about it. But I couldn't forget. He had broken another rule. He had looked. And whatever he saw in that unnaturally deep water, it had left a shadow behind his eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. The game was escalating. The simple weirdness of the red ball had turned into something creepy, something that defied explanation. And I had a sickening feeling that we were nowhere near the end. The lake was just getting started with us. After the incident with the ripples, Mark changed. It wasn't a big dramatic shift. It was a slow erosion. He became quieter, more withdrawn. The easy-going grin he always wore was gone, replaced by a permanent frown of concentration, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle in his head. He spent most of his time on the tower, just staring at the lake, his eyes tracing the shoreline over and over. He also started humming. It was a simple tune, just a few notes, repeated in a low, tuneless drone. At first, I barely noticed it. It was just a background noise like the wind. But then I realized I'd never heard the melody before. It was strange, discordant. It didn't sound like any song I knew. Rule 7. If your partner hums a tune you do not recognize. My whole body went rigid. I looked over at him. He was staring at the water, his jaw slack, that low, monotonous hum vibrating in his chest. "Mark," I said, my voice sharp. "What's that you're humming?" He snapped out of it, blinking. "Humming?" I wasn't humming. "Yes, you were," I insisted, my heart starting to pound. "That little tune." He looked at me, his expression blank. "I don't know what you're talking about, Alex." I wasn't humming. He turned back to the lake, and the conversation was over. But a few hours later, The humming started again. It was a constant, unsettling presence, the soundtrack to our silent days. Every time I heard it, a fresh wave of ice-cold fear washed over me. The strangeness began to bleed into our nights as well. One evening, as the sun went down, we were walking back to our cabin when we saw them. On the end of the dock, right where Mark always left the red ball, were 3 small, smooth stones. They were dark gray, almost black, and each one had a symbol carved into its surface. It was the same symbol I'd seen on my headboard, a spiral with a dot in the center. Rule 5. At dusk, you may find small carved stones on the dock. Do not touch them. Look at that, Mark said, his voice flat. He started to walk toward them. No! I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. The rule, Mark. Don't touch them. He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at me. For a split second, his eyes looked unfamiliar, cold and empty. Then he blinked, and he was just Mark again. Right, he said, his voice a low mumble. The rules. He let me pull him away from the dock and back towards the cabin. But all through dinner, I saw his eyes flicker towards the window, towards the dark shape of the dock and the 3 little stones resting there in the moonlight. That night, I had a nightmare. I dreamt I was standing at the bottom of the lake. It was freezing cold and utterly black, but I could breathe. I could feel the immense pressure of the water all around me, a heavy, suffocating blanket, and I could hear something calling my name. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It was a chorus of voices whispering from all directions at once. Alex, Alex, come closer. I tried to swim up towards the faint, silvery light of the surface, but my limbs were heavy, like they were made of lead. I was stuck, and the whispering voices were getting louder, closer. I woke up gasping for air, my t-shirt soaked in sweat, the sound of the whispers still echoing in my ears. The next day was worse. Mark was humming his little tune almost constantly now, and he started talking to himself, not just muttering, but having quiet, whispered conversations. I'd catch snippets of it. He'd say things like, "No, not yet," or, "I know, I just need more time." When I asked who he was talking to, he'd just stare at me with those vacant eyes and say he wasn't talking at all. That afternoon, we got the first real test of Rule 3. I was scanning the woods, trying to distract myself from Mark's humming, when I heard it. A woman's voice. "Alex? Alex, honey, is that you?" It sounded exactly like my mom. My heart leapt into my throat. My mom lived 500 miles away. There was no possible way she could be here. "Alex, it's me. I came to surprise you. Can you come down? I can't see you up there." It was her voice, the exact tone, the exact inflection. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to answer, to climb down the ladder and run towards the sound. Mark turned to me, a slow, strange smile spreading across his face. "Your mom's here, Alex," he said, his voice sounding weirdly high-pitched. "You should go say hi." Rule 3. Do not answer if you hear your name called from the woods. "It's not her," I said, my voice trembling. I clamped my hands over my ears, but I could still hear her. "Alex, please. I'm lost. I need your help." The voice was getting more frantic, more desperate. It was the sound of my mom in distress, a sound engineered to break my heart. "It's a trick," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. "It's the lake." "Don't be rude, Alex," Mark said, his voice now a low, guttural growl that didn't sound like him at all. "Go to your mother." I looked at him. His eyes were wide, and the smile was stretched too far across his face. It looked like a mask. I scrambled to the far corner of the tower, as far away from him as I could get. I stayed there, with my hands over my ears, until the voice finally faded away and the woods fell silent again. When I finally dared to look up, Mark was just sitting in his chair, staring at the water as if nothing had happened. The creepy smile was gone. He seemed completely normal. "That was intense," he said, rubbing his eyes. "For a second there, I really thought—" He trailed off. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. The stakes had been raised again. It had gone from creepy to dangerous. The lake wasn't just playing with our minds anymore. It was actively trying to lure us out, to separate us, to make us break the rules. And it was using Mark to get to me. I knew then, with a terrifying certainty, that this wasn't just a weird summer job. This was a fight for my life. And Mark. I wasn't so sure he was on my side anymore. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. The line between what was real and what the lake was creating began to blur. Voices from the woods became a daily occurrence. Sometimes it was my mom, sometimes my dad. Once it was the sweet, laughing voice of a little girl asking me to come play. I learned to ignore them, to stuff my headphones in my ears and blast music until they faded away. But it was getting harder. Each voice was a surgical strike against my willpower. Mark, on the other hand, seemed to be thriving on it. He no longer seemed scared or confused. Instead, he watched the woods with an unnerving, hungry anticipation. When a voice would call my name, a wide, predatory grin would split his face. He'd watch me, his head tilted, as if studying a bug under a magnifying glass. He stopped humming his tune out loud, but I could see his lips moving silently, forming the notes. He was becoming a stranger, a vessel for the lake's malice. The objects on the beach grew more personal, more tempting. One afternoon, instead of the red ball, a copy of my favorite book appeared at the water's edge, its cover slightly damp. Another day, it was my car keys, which I knew for a fact were safe in my pocket. Each item was a lure, a personalized invitation to step closer to the water. I never did. But Mark continued his ritual. Every evening at 6, he would walk down to the water, pick up whatever offering the lake had left, and place it carefully on the dock. His hand no longer got cold. He said it felt warm, like he was shaking hands with an old friend. One afternoon, I fell asleep in the tower. It was a hot, still day, and the relentless boredom had finally won. I don't know how long I was out, but I was woken by a sudden, sharp splash. My eyes flew open. The chair next to me was empty. Mark was gone. My heart seized in my chest. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes scanning the water in a blind panic. Then I saw him. He was standing on the dock. He was only ankle deep in the water, but he had broken the cardinal rule. Rule number 2. Never, under any circumstances, enter the water. "Mark!" I screamed, my voice cracking. "Get out of there! Get out of the water!" He turned to look at me, and his expression was one of pure, blissful calm. He wasn't smiling, but he looked happier, more at peace than I had ever seen him. "It's okay, Alex," he said, his voice soft and dreamy. "It feels nice. You should try it." The water around his ankles was swirling slowly, clinging to his skin. The dark blue seemed to be crawling up his pant legs, staining the denim a deep, inky black. "It's not just bacteria, is it?" I said, the truth hitting me with the force of a physical blow. There's something in there, something alive. Mark just nodded slowly. She's been so lonely, he whispered. She just wants company. She just wants us to come home. The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. Mark, please, I begged, my voice shaking. Get out. Right now. We can leave. We can just get in our cars and drive away and never look back. He shook his head, a small, sad movement. I can't. It's too late for me. I looked. I saw her. I've been talking to her ever since. He took another step into the water, now up to his knees. She's beautiful, Alex. You wouldn't believe it. There's nothing beautiful about this, I shouted, my panic turning to anger. It's a trap. It's been playing with us this whole time. The ball, the ripples, the voices. It's trying to trick us. They're not tricks, he said, his voice resonating with a strange, new depth. It sounded layered, like two voices speaking at once. They're gifts, invitations. He took another step, the water now at his waist. She's offering us everything, a world without pain, without worry. All you have to do is accept. The water was churning around him now, moving faster, pulling at his shirt. The sweet, rotten smell was stronger than ever, thick and cloying in the air. I could see dark shapes moving just beneath the surface, long and sleek and fast. I wanted to run. I wanted to climb down the ladder and sprint to my car, but I couldn't. I was frozen, watching my friend be swallowed by the dark, hungry water. Little did I know, I whispered to the empty air, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. That was the last time we'd ever talk. Mark turned his back to me and faced the center of the lake. He raised his arms as if in welcome. It's time, he said, his voice a strange mix of his own and a deeper, rasping echo. I'm coming home. He took one final step off the edge of the dock and disappeared beneath the surface. There was no splash, no struggle. He just sank. The water folded over him as if he were never there. For a moment, the lake was still. Then, from the center, a single, massive ripple began to expand, moving silently towards the shore. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I scrambled down the ladder so fast I nearly fell, my feet hitting the sand with a jarring thud. I didn't look back. I just ran. I ran past the dock, past the spot where the red ball always appeared, and didn't stop until I reached the safety of our cabin. I slammed the door shut and threw the bolt. My breath was coming in ragged, painful sobs. Mark was gone. The lake had him. And now I was alone. I backed away from the door and fumbled my way to the bathroom, my mind racing. Rule 7. If your partner begins to act strangely, lock yourself in the bathroom. Do not come out until sunrise. Mark had done more than act strangely. He had been consumed. He was part of the lake now. I locked the bathroom door, my hand shaking so badly it took 3 tries. I slid down to the floor, my back against the cool porcelain of the tub, and pulled my knees to my chest. The sun was setting. The quiet hours were beginning. And I was trapped in a tiny, windowless room, waiting for the monster outside to come for me. The light under the door faded from gold to orange to a deep, bruised purple, and then, finally, to black. The night had begun. The silence in the cabin was absolute. It pressed in on me from all sides, a physical weight. My own ragged breathing sounded like a thunderstorm in the tiny bathroom. Every creak of the cabin settling, every rustle of leaves outside sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through me. I sat there in the pitch black, my eyes wide open, staring at nothing. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time had lost all meaning. My world had shrunk to the cold tile floor and the flimsy wooden door that separated me from the night. Then I heard it, a soft, wet, dragging sound from outside the cabin. Shh, thump, shh, thump. It was the sound of something heavy and saturated being pulled across the forest floor. It was slow, deliberate, and it was getting closer. My heart, which I thought couldn't possibly beat any faster, found a new, frantic rhythm. I held my breath, straining to listen. The dragging stopped right outside the cabin door. I heard a faint, wet slap, as if something had been placed on the wooden porch. Then, silence again. I waited, my muscles coiled so tight they ached. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was soft, almost polite. It was followed by a voice that made every hair on my body stand on end. Alex? It was Mark's voice, but it was wrong. It was distorted, waterlogged, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a well. Each word was followed by a faint, gurgling echo. Alex, let me in. It's cold out here. Do not listen to their apologies or their pleas. The seventh rule screamed in my head. I pressed my hands over my mouth to stifle a sob. Go away, I whispered, my voice a pathetic, trembling thing. That's not very nice, Alex, the voice gurgled. I came all this way back for you. We're partners, remember? The doorknob began to rattle, gently at first, then more violently. I want to show you what I saw. She's so eager to meet you. You're not Mark, I choked out, tears streaming down my face. Mark is gone. A wet, sighing sound came from the other side of the door. Oh, I'm still here, Alex. I'm just better now. We're all better now. There's no more worry, no more pain, just peace. Just the quiet dark. The rattling stopped. Don't you want that? Don't you want to rest? I didn't answer. I just rocked back and forth, my eyes squeezed shut, praying for it to end. Then the humming started. It was the same discordant tune he'd been humming for weeks, but now it was a chorus. It sounded like dozens of voices humming at once, all slightly out of key, creating a sound that scraped at the inside of my skull. It was coming from outside the door, but it also felt like it was inside the room with me, coming from the drain in the sink, from the vent in the ceiling. The whole cabin seemed to vibrate with the awful, alien melody. I heard a splintering crack from the main room. He was trying to get in. My mind raced, fueled by pure terror. The window in the bathroom was sealed shut. There was no escape. I was a rat in a trap. I looked around the dark room, my hands searching for a weapon, anything. My fingers brushed against the shower curtain. It was thin, plastic, useless. Then my hand hit the shower head. It was metal, heavy. With shaking hands, I began to unscrew it from the wall pipe. The metal groaned in protest. The humming outside grew louder, more insistent. I heard another loud crack, the sound of wood giving way. He was breaking through the main door. I didn't have much time. Finally, the shower head came loose in my hand. It was heavy, solid. I clutched it like a lifeline. I crawled into the bathtub, pulling the thin plastic curtain closed. It wasn't much of a hiding place, but it was all I had. I crouched in the dark, my back pressed against the cold wall, the metal shower head held in a white-knuckled grip. The humming stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. Crash! The sound of the main cabin door bursting open echoed through the small space. It sounded like it had been torn from its hinges. Then I heard the wet, dragging sound again, this time inside. It was slow, slithering across the floorboards of the main room. I could hear a constant, soft dripping like a leaky faucet. Drip, drip, drip. The smell hit me next. That sweet, rotten, cloying smell of the lake. Now so strong it made my eyes water. It was the smell of decay and forgotten things. The bathroom doorknob began to turn, slowly. The lock was old. I knew it wouldn't hold. I watched in horror as the cheap metal bolt bent, then snapped. The door creaked open. I held my breath, trying to make myself smaller, invisible behind the thin sheet of plastic. In the sliver of space under the curtain, I saw 2 feet come into view. They were bare, pale white, and bloated, covered in mud and tangled green weeds. Water pooled around them on the floor. The thing that used to be Mark was in the room with me. It stood there for a long moment, dripping silently. I could hear a low gurgling sound coming from its chest, the sound of waterlogged lungs trying to breathe. Then the shower curtain was ripped aside. I screamed. It wasn't him. It was a grotesque parody, a nightmare version of my friend. His skin was gray and waterlogged. His eyes were gone, replaced by 2 dark, empty sockets from which thin tendrils of green algae drifted. His mouth hung open in a permanent O, and a constant stream of dark, murky lake water trickled from his lips. It raised a bloated white hand and reached for me. I didn't think. I just reacted. I swung the metal shower head with all my might. It connected with the side of its head with a sickening, wet crunch. The thing staggered back, a look of surprise on its horrifying, featureless face. It didn't seem to feel pain, but the blow had thrown it off balance. That was my chance. I scrambled out of the tub, slipped on the wet floor, and crawled past it, out of the bathroom. I didn't look back. I got to my feet and ran for the broken doorway. I burst out into the night. The moon was high and full, bathing the clearing in a ghostly, silver light. I glanced back at the cabin. The thing that was Mark was standing in the doorway, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't follow me. It just stood there, watching, as a dark puddle of lake water spread out around its feet. And from the dark woods that surrounded the clearing, I could see other figures beginning to emerge from the shadows. Pale, bloated shapes, all dripping, all with the same dark, empty sockets for eyes. They were slow, but they were coming. The lake was emptying itself to claim me. I turned and ran, my lungs burning, the horrifying image of Mark's empty eyes seared into my brain forever. I ran like I had never run in my life. I didn't head for my car. I knew I wouldn't make it. The things from the woods were between me and the parking area. My only chance was Silas's cabin. It was closer. I could see the faint yellow glow of a lamp in his window, a tiny beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. Branches whipped at my face. Roots grabbed at my ankles, but I didn't slow down. Behind me, I could hear them, the wet, dragging sounds. They weren't fast, but they were relentless. A low, collective moan rose from them, a sound of ancient hunger and sorrow. It was the sound of the drowned, and they were calling for me to join them. I burst into the clearing in front of Silas's cabin and scrambled onto the porch, pounding on his door with bloody fists. "Silas! Let me in. Please, let me in." The door opened a crack. Silas's pale, wrinkled face peered out. His eyes were wide, with a fear that looked ancient. "Boy, what are you doing out? It's the quiet hours." "I know. It's the lake. It has Mark. They're coming for me." I shoved against the door, forcing my way inside. He quickly bolted it behind me. The cabin was one simple room, lit by a single kerosene lamp that cast flickering, dancing shadows on the wood-paneled walls. It smelled of wood smoke, old paper, and damp earth. Silas grabbed my shoulders, his bony fingers digging into my skin. "Did you break the rules?" he rasped, his eyes boring into mine. "Did you go in the water? Did you touch the stones?" No. It was Mark. He broke the rules. He looked at the ripples. He touched the things on the beach. He went into the water. I was hysterical, the words tumbling out of me in a frantic, jumbled mess. A low moan echoed from outside, closer now. Silas's face went pale. He let go of me and hurried to the window, peeking through the edge of the curtain. What he saw made him recoil as if he'd been struck. "They've never come this far from the shore before," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Never." He turned to face me, and in his eyes I saw the full, horrifying truth of this place. He wasn't just a caretaker. He was a warden, a prisoner. "The rules aren't for your safety, boy," he said, his voice dropping to a low confessional whisper. "Not entirely. They're for containment. They're a truce, an agreement made a long, long time ago." He gestured around the cabin. Every wall was covered in shelves, and every shelf was filled with objects. Small carved stones like the ones on the dock, children's toys, a single worn leather shoe, a pair of old-fashioned spectacles, photographs of people I didn't know, all smiling from a time-long past. Souvenirs, hundreds of them. The lake. "She was here long before the trees," Silas said, his eyes distant. "She gets lonely. She wants company. The rules. They're a way of feeding her, a little at a time, to keep her satisfied, to keep her from taking everything at once." "Feeding her?" I asked, my blood running cold. "2 guards every summer," he said, his voice hollow. "Always 2. One who follows the rules and one who doesn't. The lake chooses. It tempts them, finds their weaknesses. The one who breaks stays. The one who obeys leaves. It's a sacrifice, a toll, to keep the balance." My mind reeled. The ad, the weird questions, the isolation. It was all a setup. Mark and I had been lambs led to slaughter. "Why?" I choked out. "Why do this?" "My family has been the caretakers for generations," he said, wringing his hands. "We made the pact. She gives us peace. The woods are quiet. The property is safe. As long as she gets her due. As long as the rules are followed." A loud, wet slap hit the front door, followed by a chorus of moans. They were here. "But your friend," Silas continued, his eyes wide with terror. "He didn't just break the rules. He gave himself to her, willingly. That's different. He invited her out. He broke the truce." The windows began to rattle. A dark, murky water started to seep under the door. The sweet, rotten smell filled the small cabin, thick and suffocating. "She's not just taking one this time," Silas breathed, his face ashen. "She wants it all." The door began to bow inwards, the wood groaning under an immense, unseen pressure. The things outside were throwing themselves against it. We were trapped. Then I saw it. On the wall behind Silas, above the fireplace, was a large, framed map of the property. And on that map, a thin, red line was drawn from the back of the cabin, leading deep into the woods. It was labeled Escape Tunnel, Last Resort. "Silas, the map!" I shouted, pointing. His eyes followed my finger. A flicker of something, hope, resolve, flashed across his face. "The founders weren't fools," he said. He ran to the back of the cabin and pulled a heavy rug aside, revealing a wooden trapdoor with a thick iron ring. "Go," he said, pulling it open. "It leads to the old road, miles from here. Don't stop running until you hit pavement." A tremendous crash shook the cabin as the front door splintered. Silas didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. "I'll hold them off," he said, his voice grim. "This is my family's mess, my penance." "Come with me," I pleaded. "She would never let me go," he said, turning to face the splintered door where pale, bloated hands were clawing their way through. "I'm part of this land. Go now, and don't ever look back." I scrambled down the ladder into the dark, earthen tunnel. Above me, I heard Silas let out a defiant yell, followed by the sound of splintering wood and a chorus of wet, hungry gurgles. I didn't wait. I turned and ran into the suffocating darkness of the tunnel, the sounds of the end of Silas Blackwood's world fading behind me. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I stumbled out of the tunnel and into the gray light of dawn. I found the old road and followed it for what felt like an eternity, until finally my feet hit asphalt. A truck driver found me wandering by the side of the highway, covered in mud and blood, babbling about a lake and a man named Mark. They investigated, of course. They found the property, the cabins, the lake. But they found no sign of Silas, no sign of the things that came out of the water. And they never found Mark's body. All that was left was his whistle, sitting on the edge of the dock, a souvenir. I tried to tell them the truth, but they just looked at me with pity. They said the isolation, the stress of the job, it had made me snap. They said I had fabricated the whole thing. But I know what I saw. I know what's waiting in the deep, dark water of Blackwood Lake. So tonight, when you're lying in your bed and the house is quiet, listen closely. If you hear a faint, dripping sound when all the faucets are off, think of us. Think of the ones who were taken. And if you hear a strange, discordant tune on the wind, a song you've never heard before, do me a favor. Lock your doors and pray it's not for you.